They called it a celebration, a banquet to honor Damien's latest business milestone. But walking into that ballroom in downtown Atlanta, all I felt was a quiet dread curling beneath my ribs. I'm Megan, 58 years old, widow, mother, nurse for over 30 years, and that night, apparently, I was nothing more than a formality on an invitation. The chandeliers above sparkled like they knew secrets. The scent of perfume clung to the air, sharp, expensive, unfamiliar. Waitstaff glided between the tables, silver trays in hand. Glasses clinked, laughter echoed like polite gunfire, and the room pulsed with the kind of confidence that only money buys. Damien stood near the stage, his suit tailored perfectly to a body built by gym memberships and status. He was charming, shaking hands with men who wore success like skin. His smile was flawless. I had seen that same smile when he was 6 and lied about breaking the neighbor's window. Except now, it came with a $1,000 watch and applause. I found my seat, table 9, tucked away, close to the wall, far enough to not matter, far enough for people to forget I had any hand in this man's life. And then he took the stage. Damien's voice filled the room, strong, practiced, polished. "Thank you all for coming tonight," he began. "This isn't just my success. It's a team effort, though if you ask my mother, she might say it was her doing." Laughter. I smiled, polite. Then came the blow. I mean, this is a woman who thinks microwave popcorn is gourmet cuisine. More laughter. She once told my college roommate she didn't understand why anyone paid for bottled water. Said, "The tap is free, honey." That's the kind of upbringing I had, folks. Humble beginnings. Very humble. The room roared. My hand tightened around the stem of my wine glass. He went on, basking in their approval, painting himself as the boy who pulled himself from the mud, with no mention of the hands that held him up when his knees gave out. He never said my name. I felt the sting behind my eyes, but blinked it back. I would not let these people, these strangers in gowns and cufflinks, see me bleed. A woman at my table leaned in. "I had no idea you two were even related," she whispered. "You're so different." I gave her a tight smile. "We are." My mind drifted to the nights I came home from the hospital and stood over a sleeping boy, wondering if I'd earned enough overtime to cover groceries and rent, to the day I sold my wedding ring, the last thing his father left behind, so Damien could pay for his final semester, to the coupons, the soup kitchens, the birthdays where a cake was a luxury we couldn't afford. Did I raise a man? Or a mask? I remember Damien at 8, crying when I scraped my knee chasing him through the park. He had sobbed, panicked, begged me not to die. That little boy, where did he go? My father once told me, "You raise your children to be strong, but not to forget where they came from. If they do, you didn't raise them. You built them for someone else." I didn't raise a man. I trained him to survive. And in doing so, I made myself invisible. The rest of the speech blurred, but my focus sharpened. Every word he said, every chuckle from his colleagues, I took it in, filed it away. Not in anger, not yet, but in observation. Because I knew better than to strike when emotions ran high. I wanted to stand, to walk out. But I didn't. Not for Damien, for me. So I stayed. I sat. I smiled. I watched. I noted the ones who laughed the loudest. I read the body language of the senior partners, the ones nodding along. I memorized names, faces, who toasted and who whispered. "Never start a war in their house," my father used to say. "Invite them to yours and watch how well they eat humble pie." By the end of the night, I raised my glass. "To family," I said, my voice steady. "May we never forget who fought for our beginnings." Damien didn't look at me, but others did. And in that moment, I knew I hadn't lost. I had just begun. The morning after the banquet came too quietly. No traffic, no neighbor slamming her door like she usually did on Sundays. Just stillness. The kind that isn't peaceful. The kind that wraps itself around your ribs and presses in slowly. I lay there for a while, staring at the ceiling of my apartment. The one with the water stain shaped like Mississippi. It's been there for years. Never really bothered me before. My body felt heavier than usual, like grief had settled in my bones overnight. I moved slowly, not because I was tired, but because I didn't want to hear the echo of my own steps. That silence. It was louder than the applause Damien got last night. I made coffee the same way I had for 30 years, spoonful by spoonful, measured, deliberate. Like if I got it wrong, something inside me would crack. And then, out of nowhere, I heard his voice in my head. A memory. "Will I ever be rich enough to buy you a house, Mom?" He was 7. We were walking past a gated neighborhood, and he looked up at me with big eyes and a mouth full of dreams. I told him, "You being happy is enough." He didn't believe me even then. Now he owns 2 houses, one with a pool he never swims in, the other just for entertaining. But I still live here. I sat at the kitchen table, phone in hand, thumb hovering over his contact. Part of me wanted to text him something sharp, just so he knew I wasn't fooled, just so he'd understand that I caught every slight, every word meant to shrink me in front of his boardroom friends. But I didn't, because if you have to remind someone they hurt you, they didn't care in the first place. I remembered something my husband once told me, back before cancer hollowed out his laughter. Never interrupt a fool mid-performance, let them finish. Instead, I grabbed my journal. Not the one with grocery lists and appointments. The leather one I kept hidden behind the cleaning supplies under the sink. I wrote down everything from last night, names, phrases, what was said, who laughed, and then I scribbled a note to myself. Check old account. I hadn't touched it in years, but something about the way Damien smiled when he told that room he'd pulled himself up alone, it stirred something in me. Around mid-morning, my phone rang. Unknown number. I answered, expecting a bill collector or one of those car warranty scams. "Hi, Mrs. Harper. This is Kelsey, Damien's executive assistant." Her voice was syrupy, too sweet, like she was taught to smile through the phone. "I just wanted to say thank you for attending the event last night. The photos turned out lovely. I thought you might want to share them online. The board really loved Damien's story. He nailed the rags to riches thing." I paused. "Oh," I said. "He really made an impact," she added. "You must be so proud." Proud? I nearly laughed, but I didn't. I thanked her and hung up. Then I opened my photo gallery, scrolled past the banquet snapshots, Damien on stage, Damien shaking hands, Damien beside a cake shaped like his company's logo, and one of me, just the back of my head, slightly out of focus, like an afterthought. I deleted them all. Later, I walked to the park down the block. It was the kind of day that couldn't make up its mind. The sun peeked out and ducked back in like it was nervous. I sat on the same bench I always did, across from the playground. A father was holding his daughter's hands as she tried to balance on the low beam. She fell once, giggled, got back up. He didn't scold her, just held her steady again. I spent decades helping him find his footing, I thought, and now he's pretending I was never part of the dance. I pulled out my notebook. Wrote one sentence across the top of a fresh page, what they took from me. Then below it, what they think I'll never take back. I closed the book gently, held it in my lap, and watched the little girl fall again, this time catching herself. There are more ways to speak than words. And I have just begun. I sat across from Judith at the diner, the morning light soft through the blinds. I remember how safe I felt as a kid when I watched her handle problems like water slipping through fingers, steady, unwavering. Now I was here, asking about trusts and asset transfers, not to argue, but to understand. Judith listened quietly as I spoke in hypotheticals, probing joint accounts, silent transfers, hidden investments, careful to never name Damien. Her eyes sharpened. When I finished, she handed me a pamphlet titled Know Your Leverage. She didn't lecture. She just said, "Sometimes the strongest move is knowing what you own." I folded it and slipped it into my bag. For the first time, I saw the idea of justice not as emotional release, but as consequence. Driving through the old streets towards Stone Mountain, I passed familiar landmarks. The shop where Damien used to buy comic books, the vacant lot where we planted our second garden. I parked in front of the duplex we once called home. The paint was peeling, the windows dull. I stood at the mailbox and felt ghosts of who we once were. He had cried in my arms at 15, clutching his paper that said he'd earned that scholarship. "I'll make you proud, Mom," he had said. I believed him. That boy was gone now, swallowed by ambition. Mrs. Linton drove by in her old Ford and stopped. She rolled down her window. "Megan, I wondered if that was you." She asked how Damien was doing, then awkwardly asked if he ever bought me that house he'd promised. I shook my head. "He's busy." Her eyes flickered pity, misunderstanding, regret. I don't know which. The silence between us held more truth than her words. After dinner, I opened my laptop and typed Damien's name into search. An article popped up, From Broken Household to Business Legend. I skimmed, Unstable Home, Raised Without Structure, Influenced by Neighborhood Mentors. I felt the room spin. There was no mention of me, no mention of the woman who worked 3 jobs so he could eat warm meals. He had disappeared me. I printed it, taped it to the fridge. Erasure is violence. That night, I retrieved the box from the closet, my husband's old records. Among the faded papers, I found a folder. Harper Holdings. Inside, documents with my name, long ignored. I scanned them all, saved them to a USB stick, labeled it Truth. I sat and breathed, feeling a shift. I opened my journal. I didn't write please. I wrote ledgers, dates, payments, agreements, evidence. I whispered to the dark. If he gets to rewrite the story, so do I, but mine will have receipts. I knew then this was more than hurt. This was war. I woke that morning before dawn. The article hung in my mind like a shadow. Damien's rewrite of our life now printed for the world to see. I stood by the window in my modest apartment, watching streetlights flick off one by one. The quiet was a roar in my ears. I pulled the Know Your Leverage pamphlet from my purse and skimmed the margins I'd underlined. All those silent lines about ownership, narrative, rights. I whispered to myself. They taught me to hold the line quietly. Now I'll redraw it loudly. Later that day, my phone rang. It was Kelsey, Damien's assistant. Her voice was overly bright. "Megan, we're putting together family profiles for the company website. Would you like me to include your bio and some photos?" I paused, feeling the weight behind her. "Would you like?" "Why wasn't I included in the Banquet portfolio?" I asked. She stuttered. "Oh, oversight. It wasn't intentional." I didn't argue. I ended the call and opened my voice recorder. The faint click of the app felt like arming ammunition. I knew she'd flounder, and I'd have it in her voice. That afternoon, I drove up to Damien's office building to drop off some paperwork. At the lobby entrance, a young intern passed by, looked at me, then asked, "Excuse me, do you work in catering?" I froze. That single question sliced deeper than any rumor. I spoke slowly. "I'm the mother of the CEO." She turned crimson, stammered an apology. Heads turned. A hush. I pressed on quietly. "You'll want to update your directory." That moment shifted something. My existence could no longer be ignored. I left, refusing to let the moment fade into embarrassment or silence. I met Maisie at a cafe near Midtown. She slid over copies of old board memos, early drafts showing my name on proposals, minutes, notes that were later scrubbed clean. We sat over coffee and schemed small leaks, excerpts in newsletters, corrections in public records, not wide action, but precise ones. "Let them uncover you," she said. I nodded. On my drive home, I reached for the white swan napkin I'd carried since the banquet, the folded symbol of my quiet presence. I tucked it inside my jacket pocket, hidden but present. I stared out at the passing streetlights and felt something shift inside. I don't need to shout to drown him out anymore. The envelope came just after sunrise. It sat against my door like a silent threat, thick, official, marked personal urgent. I carried it to the kitchen table, the same place where I'd once helped Damien with his spelling homework, and slid it open with the edge of a butter knife. Inside was a stack of papers and a signature. My name, written in a hand that almost looked like mine, but not quite. The document transferred partial rights of Damien's trust to him, dated 2 years ago. 2 years ago, I wasn't even in Atlanta. I stared at the loops and slants of that forged signature, my stomach turning cold. The notary's name meant nothing to me. I knew then this wasn't a mistake. It was premeditated. I laid it beside my real records, pulling out receipts, statements, emails from that year. I even remembered a family barbecue from that week, pictures on my phone of me standing by the lake in Alabama, surrounded by cousins. The timestamp alone could bury that lie. Betrayal is one thing, but forgery? That's a different kind of wound. It's deliberate. It's thought through. It means he believed I wouldn't notice, or worse, that I wouldn't fight. I leaned back in the chair, staring at the ceiling, and a memory came flooding in. The last time we truly argued. 3 years ago, Damien had come to me with another family opportunity. A real estate project. Big numbers, a lot of risk. "I just need you to co-sign, Mom," he'd said, calm but insistent. I remember how the air felt heavy that day. He said it wasn't about money. It was about trust, about building a legacy. I'd told him no. I didn't like the terms. It smelled wrong. His face had gone cold, hard in a way I hadn't seen before. "If you're not with me, you're in my way." That sentence has echoed in my head since. I thought I was protecting him from the world, but maybe I should have been protecting the world from him. By afternoon, I was at my desk again, the storage box from the closet open beside me. I flipped through the old notarized statements, clear, signed documents confirming I'd refused to co-sign any deal. I tucked them into a folder labeled Proof. Then I called Judith. She met me the next morning at her office. I laid the forged document in front of her, along with the originals. She didn't say anything for a long time. When she finally looked up, her voice was steady but tight. "This isn't carelessness, Megan. This is criminal." We decided not to move immediately. Let him think I was still blind. I wanted him comfortable, confident. It's easier to watch a snake move when it doesn't know it's being followed. That night, I scheduled a private appointment with a digital forensics expert, a quiet man who specialized in metadata tracing. I gave him a copy of the forged file to analyze. He didn't ask questions, he just nodded. Professionals like him understood what silence meant. I went home and made tea. The kitchen felt too small for what was building inside me. The anger wasn't wild, it was focused, like a current under ice. That's when I decided to call Damien. My voice was calm when I invited him to dinner. I said it had been too long, that I wanted to talk, maybe clear the air. He agreed without hesitation. The next evening, he arrived right on time, his smile polished, his cologne expensive. I'd set the table out back, the same yard where he once built forts and waged imaginary wars. The air smelled faintly of honeysuckle and smoke. We made small talk for a while. He told me about new contracts, expansion plans, the usual parade of success stories. I listened, I nodded, I waited. Then, I reached into my folder and pulled out the forged document. I laid it flat between us. "Do you remember," I asked quietly, "what integrity means?" He laughed at first, that easy charm he'd learned to weaponize. "Mom, what is this about?" I didn't blink. "This is about the line you crossed, the one you thought I'd never see." His smile faltered. He leaned back slightly, eyes darting down to the page. The silence stretched. I could hear the cicadas hum beyond the porch light. "I didn't," he started, but I cut him off. "You have one chance to fix this," I said, my voice low, steady, "before I stop being your mother and start being your opponent." He looked at me then, really looked. And for the first time in years, I saw something new in his eyes. Not arrogance, not control. Fear. I got there early. Too early maybe, but I needed to sit, think, breathe. The reception area at Tamsin Duval's office was quiet, with that smell of copier paper and pine-scented cleaner. I sat with my purse on my lap, the documents inside pressing into my side like a heartbeat. The forged shareholder agreement. The server logs I'd pulled with Melissa's help, and every unanswered question I'd shoved down for the past 2 years. I stared at the wall across from me, but my mind ran loops. "I built this too," I kept hearing myself say, to Damien, to myself, to a younger version of me who still believed he'd call one day and say, "Mom, I need your help." He never did. Tamsin came out of her office wearing that no-nonsense black blazer she always wore when she meant business. "Come in," she said. I laid everything out on her desk, line by line, date by date. The signature mismatch, the last access timestamps, the metadata on the notary seal. She listened. Quiet, focused. Then she said the words I already knew were coming. "Once this is out, there's no going back. It's not just legal. It's war." I nodded. "I'm not trying to win. I'm trying to be heard." Not even an hour later, the statement dropped. Damien's PR team didn't waste time. It read like a pre-written hit job. Mrs. Holloway's allegations are entirely without merit. She holds no legal claim to any Raytech entity. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just stared at the screen, at those words that stripped me of everything I'd built, everything I thought he knew better than anyone. Mother versus his mogul, the headline read. I scrolled. News clips, tweets, podcasters dissecting my emotional motivations. One even called me a disoriented elder clinging to legacy. So this was the strategy. Erase the person by questioning her memory, her relevance. But they didn't know what Tamsin had found next. I went back the next morning. This time she didn't sit. She pointed to a folder on her desk. "Remember that co-investment contract for the Midvale property? The one you and Damien signed back in 2012? I nodded. "Yeah, that was one of the first we did after your dad passed." She slid the folder toward me. "Your name's gone. Replaced with a holding company, registered just 6 months ago." I stood frozen. "Gone?" "In the public filing, yes, but we traced the edit." She flipped the page, highlighted. "Accessed from a Kellen PR terminal. Someone inside his team." My voice caught. "So it's not just theft, it's a cover-up." "Looks that way." I leaned against the desk, staring at that hollow spot where my name used to be. "He's not fighting me, he's erasing me." Tamsin said, "We can file for a forensic audit, get subpoena power, if you're ready." I've been ready. I just didn't know how deep the hole was. By late afternoon, I'd made my decision. I didn't tell anyone. I just dressed up, got into a rideshare, and headed to Raytech Tower. The gala was already in full swing. Suits, champagne, photographers, everyone pretending they weren't part of a machine that ate people like me. I didn't belong there. But I walked in anyway. I'd once stood beside Damien at these things. Now I walked past the same reporters who used to ask me for comment. None recognized me right away. The lobby gleamed like a movie set. Chandeliers, velvet ropes, polished speeches in the background. And there he was, Damien, shaking hands, laughing, wearing the same expression he used to flash after a school spelling bee, like the world owed him applause. I waited until he saw me. His smile dipped, just slightly. "Mom," he said, low enough not to draw attention. "Not here." I stepped in. "You don't get to pick the battlefield anymore." He glanced around. "You've made your point." "Not yet," I said. He tried to usher me away from the cameras, but I stayed rooted, calm, controlled. You can erase names from contracts. You can scrub photos from websites. You can pretend you built all this on your own, but you can't rewrite who raised you. He hissed, "You're embarrassing yourself." "No," I said, louder. "You've embarrassed the truth." A few heads turned. A camera flash popped. Trista stood frozen across the room, watching us like a hawk sizing up a storm. I leaned in, dropped my voice. "You gave me a stage tonight. I'll make sure it's one you never forget." And I turned, walked straight out the front doors, not a single step unsure. I opened my inbox just as dawn gray crept past the curtains. The first email, request for comment on forged contract scandal from a national business outlet. The second, a leaked screenshot of the company's asset registry. My name was gone, replaced by unknown trust. My breath caught. The world was watching. I whispered to the empty room, "They can't write me out." I remembered a quote I once read. "The arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends toward justice." I repeated it to myself, like a prayer or a warning. I would not vanish quietly. Later that morning, I called for legal access to the next board meeting. Kellen denied it. Doesn't surprise me. But I went anyway, arriving at the tower lobby with Tamsin beside me. Security blocked our path. I watched their badges, the stern faces, the whispered, "Who is that?" Tamsin held up a copy of the bylaws. She quoted them, unflinching. As founding shareholder, Mrs. Harper is permitted access to all general meetings. The murmurs rose. Executives glanced at their shoes. Behind the glass booth, Trista's face toughened. I stepped forward, voice strong. I will not leave until everyone here acknowledges what's true. At dusk, the gala began, the 10th anniversary of Damien's family success. The keynote address was framed as a tribute. I slipped into the hall unnoticed. Then I saw it, a display monitor showing the speech draft, ghost-written lines. I froze. I compared them mentally to the journal entries my husband left behind. The matching phrasing was more than coincidence. They had lifted his voice, attributed it to Trista. They weren't just erasing me, they were stealing him. Rage and clarity collided in my chest. I marched to the board and faced everyone gathered. Cameras now turned. I held my ground. If you truly knew my husband's words, not just his brand, how many of you would be standing behind Trista right now? Gasps broke around me. I pressed the evidence, journal lines next to the speech draft, showing the theft, contracts with altered clauses, names substituted. The silence thundered. Executives shuffled. Trista's veneer cracked. Kellen's face went pale. Finally, he stood, rigid and silent. He crossed the room and placed a hand on the microphone stand. In that still moment, all eyes were on me. The morning of the summit, I stood outside the entrance longer than I should have. Inside, behind the polished glass doors, waited every person who once decided I didn't matter. Chandeliers hung heavy like judgment. Tables glistened with over-polished silver and white linen. I moved through it like a ghost, but one that had come back to collect. The room was thick with high society laughter, name tags that sparkled like metals, and the kind of power games men in suits play without flinching. I found my place on the fringe, sat down quietly, let the air settle around me. I clutched the white swan napkin I'd folded from home, tiny, barely holding shape anymore, but it grounded me, reminded me who I was before they rewrote me out. Damien walked on stage, confident in the way someone becomes when no one's told them no in years. He welcomed them all, thanked the board, nodded to investors like he was royalty, talked about growth, future, family. That last word hit like a nail dragged across a mirror. Family, his version anyway. One where I didn't exist. One where he wore my husband's name like a badge but buried everything that name once meant. The audience clapped politely. I didn't. I pressed the napkin tighter. Thought to myself, how many versions of family will he script until there's nothing left but him in the frame? Halfway through his speech, I stood. Quiet, not theatrical. No gasps yet. Just a shift in the air. "Excuse me," I said. Calm, even. "I have a few words." He blinked. A ripple moved through the crowd like someone had cracked open a window midwinter. I walked up, laid the small black USB drive on the podium, labeled in white, Truth. I connected it. The screen behind him flickered, then filled. Document after document, line after line, metadata, contract logs, side-by-side comparisons of the forged agreement next to the original. Scans of handwritten notes from my husband's journals, and then, matching lines, lifted word for word, now attributed to Trista in the company's keynote materials. That broke the room. I didn't yell. I didn't need to. "You erased me from your story," I said, slow, clear. "But the story was never yours alone." Cameras began to focus. I didn't flinch. "The shares you made disappear?" I paused, eyes locking with his. "I made them reappear, under my name. And I left it there. No crescendo, no flair, just truth." Silence rushed in like a vacuum. Damien's lips parted, but no sound came. Trista was already gone. I'd seen her slip out the side, pale, hands clenched. Halden, stiff-backed, turned to his assistant, whispering fast. The board, well, They looked like men who just realized they'd been sold a story with the last page ripped out. I walked down from that podium slower than I'd climbed up. Judith met me near the lobby. She didn't hug me, didn't say much, just leaned in and whispered, "They just witnessed a metamorphosis." I looked back one last time. Not for them, for me. Then my phone buzzed. A message lit the screen. No name, just words. "You just became the headline they can't rewrite." The morning light spilled across the bedroom floor, soft and slow, like it knew something had changed. I sat up, reached for my phone, and before I could even unlock it fully, the notifications rolled in like a flood. Every major outlet had picked it up. Mother outsmarts billionaire son in boardroom twist. The forgotten founder reclaims her name. Truth in heels, how one woman took back her legacy. I scrolled in silence, not smiling, not crying, just still. I clicked one of the videos from the summit. My voice echoed through the room. Me, calm, steady, unapologetic. I replayed it once, then again, not for reassurance, but acknowledgement. It had happened. The story was out. I was finally heard. And it wouldn't be scrubbed this time. I made coffee slowly. No rush, no buzz of anxiety. Just me and the birds outside the kitchen window. I packed a small bag and drove out to the house, our old home. The one Damien nearly sold off like it was some dusty heirloom. The gate creaked, grass high, roses tangled and wild. But it still stood, still ours. I stepped inside, dust rising like memory. I walked room to room until I found the old photo drawer, sat cross-legged on the hardwood, pulling out moments, wedding smiles, paint-stained fingers, kids in pajamas. Christmas morning. Legacy, I realized, isn't always on paper. Sometimes it lives in snapshots, laughter caught midair. I called Judith, told her I was here. She said, "You should write this down. All of it. Don't let someone else own your story again." I said, "I will. But not out of anger. That part's done." I lit a small candle beside my husband's old photo, one where he's looking off camera, like he saw the future coming. I whispered, "They tried to erase you too. But you were never gone. They just didn't want to see." That evening, as the sun began to fade behind the orchard line, a new email pinged in. It was from an old name I hadn't seen in years, someone from Kellen's competitive circle, now heading a global philanthropic trust. They offered me a seat, said they wanted people of principle, said they'd push the appointment public if Kellen issued a formal apology, and relinquished some of the branding built on our family values. I read it twice, then once more, and I declined the stipulation, told them, "I'll join, but not for revenge. That chapter's closed. I've already won by walking out of that building with my head held high." They accepted. Later that week, I sat down for a televised interview. One camera, one chair, one truth, no dressing it up, just the story, raw and honest. They asked about the fight, about Damien, about what came next. I answered simply, without venom. He didn't steal my future. He just made me fight for it. When the journalist leaned in and asked, "What would you say to your younger self?" I paused. Let the silence do its part. Then said, "Never underestimate a woman who's been told to stay quiet. She'll make the loudest echo when the time is right." We wrapped, and I left the studio without makeup, without handlers. Just me. Back home, I sat by the window with tea gone cold. A small bird landed on the sill, flicked its wings, then settled. And right then, my granddaughter ran into the room, holding a sketch pad nearly as big as her chest. "Grandma," she said, grinning, "draw with me." I closed the laptop, tucked my notes away, and joined her on the rug.